Good morning, fellow Guyanese. It's good to come to you this morning on a very important subject matter. I wish to address some characters in our society who exercise what I would term egotistical arrogance. Egotistical arrogance is a simple term to describe some persons who are so egotistic. They believe they know everything. They're the all-knowers in our society. They believe that they are in a sphere by themselves. But this arrogance avoids them from the factual basis or foundational basis of facts. It buries them in their ego to dominate, and their ego to want to dispose the truth in many ways, shape, and form. I would say these persons and these characters that exist in our society are they demonstrate what I call willful ignorance. And willful ignorance is understanding the truth, knowing the truth, but avoiding the truth, avoiding the facts, avoiding the reality. So in their egotistical arrogance, they demonstrate willful ignorance. And you know these characters. They say 33 is more than 34. They deny that they tried to rig the elections. They say they had the SOPs but could never produce the SOPs. We had to go to every level of the judicial system through which our constitution, our democracy function. 5 months of reckless behavior from these characters that today come before you in a reform brand, presenting themselves as the knowers and embracers of facts. I've seen these very people ponder and waver when their country required of them to be fair, open, democratic, and honest. These very voices were lost in the wind when the country called upon them to stand up against efforts to rig the elections, when they were supposed to speak about a no-confidence motion in which a government stayed in office for 2 years after the successful passing of a no-confidence motion against the Constitution. Where were these voices of dignity and honor? But today, the egotistical arrogance and willful ignorance must be exposed. I call it a convenience of conscience. These guys and these characters demonstrate a convenience of conscience that is mind-boggling. They call themselves the virtuous ones of accountability. They call themselves the upholder of democracy. But a convenience of conscience cannot be ignored. And we must expose these persons. We must expose these characters. I wish to take you on a journey this morning, presenting to you some slides and the facts on the Natural Resource Fund and on the abuse of our Constitution. And I want to reflect a bit on the legal framework for the Natural Resource Fund and the 2018 No Confidence motion. It is important because I see these very persons who speak from a body of knowledge, from the position of being well educated on this matter, through the willful erosion and through convenience of conscience. So I want to remind them. I want to remind the population of who these persons are, what they embody, what they support. I want to remind the population a bit this morning of who are the characters. In every movie, in every script, there are characters. Some fictional, some real. But I would like to examine the real characters that have somehow find a voice of convenience that is not based in truth or facts or law or reality. It is based on a convenience of conscience aimed at one thing: discrediting this government. So let's do some reflections this morning. Now, what did the PPP civic government inherited in August 2020? Particularly in relation to the NRF. And I hope the operators are putting the screen up. What did the PPC government inherited in August 2020? We inherited an NRF, the Natural Resource Fund. We inherited an NRF Act that was illegitimate and unlawful. Yes. Why was the NRF Act illegitimate and unlawful? Here are the reasons. On the 21st of December 2018, we're close to that date. On the 21st of December 2018, a no-confidence motion was passed by the National Assembly. Yes, you would recall that. On the 21st of December 2018, a no-confidence motion was passed by the National Assembly. On the 3rd of January 2019, after the no-confidence motion was passed, the NRF Act was passed by the National Assembly after the no-confidence motion, with no input from the then opposition, the People's Progressive Party Civic. On the 23rd of January 2019, in an illegitimate and unlawful way, this act that was passed in an illegitimate process after a no-confidence motion was successfully passed in the National Assembly, the NRF Act was ascended to by then President Granger. So two problems here. One, a no-confidence motion was passed. After that, this NRF, with no input from the opposition, was passed on the 3rd of January 2019. And the then president proceeded to ascend to the act on the 23rd of January 2019. What should have happened really when the no-confidence motion was passed on the 21st of December 2018? Because some of these guys pride themselves as brilliant lawyers, great mathematicians. But let me examine, as a layman, what was supposed to happen when the no-confidence motion was passed on the 21st of December 2018. Let's go to the Constitution. Article 106 of the Constitution is clear about the consequences of an NCM. Article 106 of the Constitution is clear about the consequences after the NCM. 106.6 says, the cabinet, including the president, shall resign. You hear that? The cabinet, including the president, shall resign if the government is defeated on a vote of confidence. On the 21st of December 2018, if these law-abiding citizens, the lovers of democracy, the virtuous ones of truth, if they had any decency, and none of them would have dared pen the letter, would have dared raise their voice or a finger when the constitution of this country was willfully trampled upon by these very characters, these egotistical persons who demonstrate willful ignorance and are what I call people who are characterized in the convenience of conscience. They are ultra-crepidarian. That's a word you can use to capture them in totality. Ultra-crepidarian. Denialism. They denied in the public view of the world that they were defeated in a no confidence motion. So Article 106 of the Constitution made it clear that as a consequence of the NGM, 106.6 says, the cabinet, including the president, shall resign if the government is defeated on a vote of confidence. Did they resign? No. Instead, in an illegitimate way, they passed the the NRF, National Resource Fund Act. 106.7 goes on to state, notwithstanding its defeat, the government shall hold an election within 3 months. Oh my Lord. Clear as daylight. Notwithstanding its defeat, the government shall hold an election within 3 months. Remember how long we waited for the elections? We waited 2 years after. But much more than that. After winning the elections, we had to wait 5 months and fight so the will of the people would have been heard. That is thievery. Where were these voices? These voices were defending the illegitimacy. These very voices were defending the erosion of the Constitution. These very voices were protecting the illegal act of the then government. Instead of resigning, immediately, the APNU AFC forced through the parliament an NRF Act that was fatally flawed. Now let us look. We'd like to speak about governance and transparency. Let us look at the NRF Act that they rushed through the parliament. And let me show you the fatal flaws. Just a few examples. On governance, the Act demonstrated weak provisions on governance. What the Act did was it concentrated the powers in the hands of the Minister of Finance. This Act did not provide for any board of directors whatsoever. It didn't provide for any independent arm. It concentrated the power in the Minister of Finance. And I will go on to demonstrate to you what was the consequence of such concentration of power in the then Minister of Finance hand. So on governance, that's one issue. On transparency, the non-existence of transparency in the act that was rushed through Parliament and passed after the NGM. It was opaque. It was complicated. It was not designed for the ordinary population to understand. They had a very complex formula that meant nothing. It was subjective. It was assumptions-based. The formula to determine the ceiling on withdrawal from the fund was complex. It was not meant to enhance transparency. There was no requirement in that act to publish deposits into the fund. Can you imagine that? None of us would have known about the deposits in that fund. Remember the 18 million bonus? Yes, that was what they were contemplating. To hide from the public the deposits into the fund. So that act had weak governance and non-existent transparency. There was no requirement to publish deposits into the fund. And expenses allowed to be charged directly to the fund without prior parliamentary approval. Can you imagine? The parliament was completely taken out of the equation. There was no oversight. the parliamentary oversight was completely removed. Any expenses under this fund would have been a direct charge. The Minister of Finance, with a concentration of power, would have gone into the fund, extracted what he wanted. We would not have even known what is in the fund. That was the bill that was illegitimately passed. Let's go on. What did we do? After assuming office, the People's Progressive Party, civic government, took to Parliament in 2021 a new NRF bill. And what the bill did, just a few examples, it strengthened governance, improved transparency, and extended parliamentary oversight. Three of the most key features. How did it improve governance? One, there was complete reduction of the ministerial powers. For a matter of fact, if the minister does not publish the deposit, you would not have known what the deposit was. Within a time period, he is liable to 10 years imprisonment. So one, you saw the reduction of the powers, the ministerial power. Two, an independent board was brought into play. The establishment of a board of directors. And the vesting of previous ministerial powers in the board of directors. That is what the new act did. That is governance. Taking away the power that they rested in the bosom of the minister and transferring that power to the independent board of directors. That is real governance. They won't write about this. They can't defend their act. We're comparing here. On transparency, the new act of 2021 that we passed simplified a formula, setting a ceiling on transfer from the NRF to where? Not to a hidden account, not to a secret account, but to the consolidated fund. It established a simplified formula, it established a ceiling, and it established that the money must be transferred to the consolidated fund. Further, it goes on to say, instead of the act they illegitimately passed, where none of us would have known what the deposits and the revenue are, the new act that the People's Progressive Party civic government passed ensured that all receipts required to be published in the official gazette. And what? They removed the parliament, removed the parliamentary oversight. In the new act, all deposits were not only required to be published in the official gazette, but also tabled in the National Assembly. And further, no expense can be met without prior parliamentary approval. So whereas in their illegitimate passing, they removed the role of the parliament, today the parliament reviews every expenditure. The parliament approves every expenditure. Nothing can be spent from the NRF without the parliamentary approval. Without the parliamentary approval. Who constitute the parliament? Members of parliament from the government and the opposition. But these egotistical arrogance, the egotistical arrogance from these people, the willful ignorance, the ultra-crepidarians, they would never tell this. They would avoid these facts. It is a convenience of conscience that is exercised. It's denialism. And then look, furthermore, parliamentary oversight, non-existent in the illegitimate act that they passed. In the parliamentary oversight, what did we see? Annual transfer from the NRF, the consolidated fund, approved as part of the budget process. Oh my, can you imagine that? What more accountability can be brought? The annual transfer from the NRF to the consolidated fund, and it must be approved as part of the budget process. And the budget process includes parliamentary approval. It includes the examination of estimates. It includes the examination of expenditure. It includes oversight in the governance structure. It is then incorporated into the national budget, and I hope the operators, the technicians are putting these screens up, because I want you to see them. Then what? It doesn't end there. There is the ex-ante scrutiny through the Committee of Supply, the ex-post scrutiny through the Public Accounts Committee. After all of that, after the parliamentary approval by everyone in Parliament, it still must get the scrutiny from the Auditor General, the expenditure. And then, of course, the examination from the Public Accounts Committee. None of this was existent in the Illegitimate Act. Let's move on. Since the enactment of the new NRF, the PPP Civic has complied fully with the law. We have complied fully with the law. Contrast this to the APNU AFC, to these very guys who are running around. In contrast, after the NCM was passed on the 21st of December 2018, the then APNU AFC government, one, refused to call the election. Where were these voices? Where were the voices of those who can be categorized as people who ride under the convenience of conscience? Where were these voices? They were silenced. They were silenced by the reception of the goodies. Contrast that after the NGM was passed. They refused to call the elections against the provision of the Constitution until the 2nd of March 2020. And they then refused to respect the result of the elections until the 2nd of August 2020. Can you imagine? But further, these people, not one of them penned a letter when illegitimately they incurred $292 billion of expenditure in 2019 after the NCM with no parliamentary oversight. What is more corrupt than that? Blatant, daylight robbery and corruption. No parliamentary oversight, no opposition, an illegitimate parliament against the constitutional provision. They incurred $292 billion of expenditure in 2019 after the NCM was passed with no parliamentary oversight. They incurred a further $150 billion of expenditure in 2020 after the NCM with no approved budget. Can you believe this? Nowhere else in the world. This is a depth of bad governance. This is a depth of bad governance and lack of transparency. Not only the $292 billion in 2019, but it further incurred $150 billion of expenditure in 2020 after the NCM with no approved budget and no parliamentary oversight. Compare that to the PPP Civic. When we were in office with a minority government and they cut the budget, they cut public servant pay, they cut this, they cut that, we lived with the cut. Can you imagine if we had done this? That if without an approved budget or with a cut budget, we went ahead and incurred these expenditure? Can you imagine what these people would have said? But they all went silent. Additionally, the APNU AFC, remember this, that is why they wanted to vest this power in the Illegitimate Act in the bosom of the minister, because they showed us what they were capable of. The APNU AFC had previously attempted to siphon off the 18 million signing bonus. When the APNU AFC finance minister first initially denying the existence of the bonus. You remember that? Oh, how short the memory is. Those who suffer from the convenience of conscience would play as if this never occurred. We must know who we're dealing with. We must know who these people are. We must know their motive. The Minister of Finance initially denying the existence of the bonus, then claiming not to know anything about it, then claiming that he thought it was a gift. Imagine if that was the PPP. Imagine if that was the PPP. That is not long ago. That is just in the last government. This was a reality. Meanwhile, what did we learn? The 18 million US was illegally diverted from the consolidated fund and hidden in a secret bank account. Where were the voices of all the finance experts and chief auditors who now speak from their forked tongue? Where were these voices? This was a reality. So, this morning, my dear Guyanese brothers and sisters, I had to go back to this lawlessness and dishonesty because I've quietly sat by, reading and listening to the mischief, the falsification of the truth, the denial of the facts, from the egotistical arrogance of these characters who willfully demonstrated ignorance, the convenience of the conscience must never ever override the facts, the truth, and what make us a society, what make us a country, is a constitution that must always be protected and respected, is a constitution that all of us swear to uphold. That is what is a foundational pillar under which our nation stands. I hope I was able to bring some clarity through the facts. I hope I was able to expose those that hide under the umbrella of the convenience of the conscience. And I hope that we are all in a better place now to understand the characters, their playbook, and who are the playwriters. Thank you. Have a great day. Together, we are stronger. Together, we are better. All for one for all. One Guyana. God bless you. Thank you.